Prepping for the NRL22 championship this week on Mail Call Mondays. Mail Call Mondays is brought to you by MDT. If you need a chassis system for your precision rifle, check out mdttac.com. I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. Welcome to another Mail Call Mondays, and this Monday our question comes from Dale and Paul. And Dale asks, are you shooting the NRL22 championship again this Memorial weekend? And Paul asks, and if so, what changes are you making to this year's championship? Yes, I am going to shoot the NRL22 championship at the end of the month in Nebraska. So it is going to be a very interesting time. And yet again, like I did last year, I'm running right down to the wire on prepping my gun for the championship. Now, last year I shot the Tikka T1X in a MDT ACC chassis, and I had an Athlon scope on it. And I didn't lose because of the equipment. I'll preface on that. I lost because there were some extremely skilled shooters out there, and I was not up to the snuff. But I did have some issues with the gun that irritated me greatly. So we were rushing right down to the wire to get the gun put together and to get the workup done on the gun. And I had just recently had the Lothar Walther barrel put on it. And I was really putting a lot of ammo through that gun to try to get it sorted out. And I don't like to clean guns going into matches, so I did not really do a full top to bottom cleaning on that rifle, and I think I ended up with just a little bit too much fouling in the chamber, and I started to have extraction and feeding issues about midway through the match, and it really started to cause me some problems, because the Tikka only has 10-round magazines, and it is not super easy with that gun to do a mag change in the middle of a course of fire. So that caused me a couple of little glitches. So this year I'm going to switch things up a little bit. So far, you've seen we've done coverage of a couple of the NRL22 matches this year, and I've been shooting the Bergara B14R, which I have sitting here in front of me. So this rifle has performed really, really well. It punches well above its price point. The accuracy on it, I really have no complaints. The Voodoo V22s beat it out just a little bit on accuracy if we're just measuring how tight the groups are. The difference between the Voodoo and the Bergara really comes down to the action. The Voodoos have a very, very smooth action. The Bergara action is not quite as smooth, but you are paying more than twice for a Voodoo what you're paying for a B14R. So those things are to be expected. Other things like the factory trigger that comes in the B14R is great. I haven't really had many issues at all with the B14R. Now, again, like the Tikka, I've noticed that when it gets really fouled, you can run into some issues with cases not throwing clear. Now, I am shooting mainly either SK Match or Lapua Center X, and those both have a really thick, waxy lubrication on the outside of the cases. And it's not just the outside of the bullet, it's outside of the whole case. And so when that stuff builds up, it makes extraction a little bit slower, and I think that's what slows down kicking the cases out of the action. So learning from last year, I will make sure I clean the gun completely and then foul it out right before I go into the match. I have done on a couple of the rifles here. I don't believe I've done it on this one yet. Completely cleaned the gun and then shot accuracy afterwards to see what kind of variance I get. The last two that I did, the Voodoo and the T1X, really didn't have much of a variance at all after I completely cleaned the bore and the chamber. So we'll see on this one because the barrel is just a little bit I don't want to say lower grade, but it's a rat grade barrel, whereas the other two are have hand lapped, very high end barrels in them. So I have decided I am going to shoot the Bergara, but I'm not going to do the easy thing, which will be just shoot it in its factory stock. We do have a ACC chassis on the way from MDT, so I'll be dropping this into an ACC chassis. I do have a TriggerTech Diamond flat face trigger that will be going in here. The trigger on the B14R is great. I haven't really had any problems with it, but I do notice that when I'm trying to make a really tricky shot or really unstable shot, it takes me longer to break the shot because I'm really concentrating on not disturbing the rifle as I apply pressure to the trigger. And that usually is because a heavier trigger, it is easier to disturb the rifle as you press through the brake than it is with a lighter trigger. A lighter trigger, it's just you're applying less force to the rifle as a whole to cause the trigger to fire. And I can get down to 8 ounces with this trigger. It actually is 4 to 23 ounces is the adjustment range. I usually don't go lighter than 8 ounces, but we're going to add some weight to this rifle as well, so we don't have to go super, super light on the trigger pull and still get the same effect. The ACC chassis, now obviously as you heard at the beginning of this, we are sponsored by Modular Driven Technologies, the show is, and MDT is going to send out the ACC chassis for us to use during the competition. And of course, if any of you guys want to shoot my rig when you see me out there, let me know. We will figure out a way to get it done so you guys can get on the rifle. If anybody's rifle goes down in our squad, obviously I generally let anybody that wants to shoot my gear, because that's really the only way to grow the sport and to see what you like. And it's the cheapest way to see what you like is to be able to try everybody else's gear. And I really think that's the way things should go anyway. So the chassis and the rifle are the easy part because you can make just about anything work. I could shoot the rifle in stock form like this and be just fine. Now, on it right now, we have the Bergara 20 MOA base, which works just fine. We are going to go ahead and put an MDT 20-minute base on here just because it gives me an opportunity to see how well the MDT base works with the Bergara action, because the MDT base is designed for a Remington 700 short action. The Bergara B14R, the top of the action, has the same offset between the front receiver ring and rear receiver ring as the Remington 700. So it's designed to work the same way. I'll just be interested to see if the recoil lug that's designed in the MDT scope base matches up with the Bergara. If it doesn't, if we have some issues, then we'll continue to use the Bergara base that I have on here. That has worked fine so far. The biggest thing about this is getting the optics set up. Now, so far, you notice I don't have a scope on the rifle right now. I have been using a Bushnell. We've been using the Forge rifle scope on it as a first focal plane rifle scope. Great magnification range. However, the elevation is significantly limited in that scope. And I need about 21, 22 mils of elevation to be able to get out to that 380, 390 yard distance that we saw in the last NRL22 championships. Now, I haven't checked yet to see what the posted longest range shot is going to be, but if I shoot for that same distance as far as internal elevation, then I always have the scale in the reticle to be able to use to reach out a little bit farther. So we have to have an incline base. That really is absolute. How much of an incline you have is going to depend upon how much internal adjustment you have in your scope. The Forge, I absolutely love that scope because it's relatively light, it's relatively compact, it has 0 stops built into it, it has locking turrets. It ticks all the boxes that I need for that 100 yard and in, but it really doesn't have the elevation to get out much past 200 yards on a rim fire. On a center fire, I could use that as a regular competition scope with a center fire gun and not have a problem at all in a long range match. So to that end, I contacted Bushnell, and they sent out one of their Elite Tacticals, and this is the 3.5 to 21 by 50 millimeter HDMR 2. And this is a little bit of a departure from the previous HDMR 2. This one, the parallax adjusts down so that we can get that 25-yard shot if needed. That was a big issue with my previous HDMR, as the parallax would not adjust close enough to allow me those close-in shots. That's a huge problem because even if you dial the magnification down, you still cannot get a clear reticle and a clear target at the same time. And traditionally in NRL22 competition, the really close-in targets are really small. So if your parallax is all jacked up, you can have a hard time finding the targets. So on the HDMR2, we get down to that low adjustment range, but we still have a ton of internal elevation built into the scope, and 21 power magnification is going to be sufficient. Now this one, because it is the HDMR2, it indicates it has a Horus reticle on it, and this has the H59 reticle in it, which I have used on quite a few other scopes. I'm very familiar with it. I'm very comfortable with using it. It has the nice Christmas tree grid reticle on it, but I still have a very fine center aiming point. And for me, it's just really usable. It's nice because I can generally, if I have a good backdrop, I can spot impacts on it and I can make adjustments very quickly based off of that. So that's going to help us out greatly. It has 0 stops, so we're good to go there. This one is a little bit different because it does not have a locking top turret, but it does have a locking windage turret. So a little bit different from some of the other scopes that I've used where we have a push-pull locking elevation and windage. Not really going to be a big deal on this because this is not a tactical rifle. I don't have to worry about rolling the turret when I get the gun out of a bag. I'm always going to check my turret to make sure it is set where I want it set before I start a stage. So that's just my pre-flight checklist. So I'm going to be good to go there. So we've got the optic, we've got the rifle set up. We're still working through some of the other things. I'm not sure which bipod I'm going to run yet. The SkyPod is probably a really top-end option. I love running the SkyPod when I'm running centerfire rifles in a PRS-type environment. And for that reason, it may be my choice on this one. One of the big reasons to go with the ACC chassis over the stock B14 rifle stock is because I will have an Arca rail on the bottom of the ACC chassis, and that's going to give me the ability to run the bipod wherever I want to run the bipod. And both the SkyPod and the worn Skyline bipod that I have are both Arca compatible bipods, so they will work well on both of those. One of the reasons I say you could run the factory B14 stock just fine is they have QD flesh cups on here, and you can get an Arca rail to go under the forend. Area 419 makes quite a few options that would bolt into the stock. Some might require slight modification. I would probably go with their weighted model so I can add a little bit more weight to the forend of the gun. But the ACC chassis will take care of all of that, and it will give me a little bit more adjustment, a toolless length of pull adjustment, and better comb adjustment as well. Plus, I prefer the pistol grip location on the ACC chassis. This works just fine, but if I'm going to be in some really weird positions, I like the pistol grip chassis. It just works a little bit better for me overall. Plus, the ACC chassis has the tunable weights, so we'll be able to balance things out a little bit better. Now, rings to mount the scope. I went back and forth on if I wanted to do an actual scope mount or if I wanted to go with individual rings. With the ACC chassis, you've got enough adjustment on the comb that you can do either. I decided to run rings on this because the MDT Elite rings, they have a bubble level built into the back of them. We'll see how usable that is when I get them mounted up. But on the odd chance that I need to use the Bagara base, it has a logo in the middle here. It's not a traditional Picatinny rail. So if you have a mount that uses recoil lugs or cross bolts in the middle, things like the spur mount or the MDT Elite mount, it won't work well on this rail. So using rings just gives me a little bit more of an option. It gives me a little bit better placement options. I generally prefer mounts, but I'm not really losing much with going with rings in this instance. Plus, I've used the MDT mount. It works great. This gives me a chance to use the rings and see how well the rings work. So, thankfully, they've got all that stuff. We're supposed to be getting it here rather soon, so we'll put it together. Now, after I get everything assembled, the prep work is going to be kind of interesting because the first thing that I'm going to have to do, well, the first thing I've already done is shot it for velocity. So I've got the velocity on the ammo that I'm using so I can start building my ballistic profile with my velocity. Once I get out to the range and get the scope on it, then I'm going to go out and true my drop scale factor in the Kestrel. So that will match up what the predicted curve is with the Kestrel with what the actual curve I'm seeing with the actual ammo lot that I'm going to use for competition. So right now, we're just waiting for parts to arrive. Once the parts arrive, we'll do a quick video putting the gun together, and then we'll get it out to the range, and we're going to go through the truing process. And hopefully, I will be able to knock out a video on that before we head down to the NRL22 Nationals. If not, then we'll probably have that video when we come back from the NRL22 Nationals. And of course, we'll have a breakdown of how the NRL22 Nationals go. And if you guys are going to be at the NRL22 National Championships, please drop a comment down below. I'd love to see how many of you guys are heading down there. And if you see me down there, please stop me. Ask me about my gear. Ask me to shoot the rifle. I'm more than happy to talk to you guys in the real world. That's going to do it for this Mail Call Mondays. I know it's kind of short, compressed, throwing everything at you all together, but I need to get this video out and published so we can get on to getting ready. If you guys have any questions or comments over anything that I've covered on this Mail Call Mondays, drop a comment in the comment section down below or send it to us on Facebook or Twitter. If you like the video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And if you want to know how to support content that you know and love, please check us out over on Patreon. And until next time, get out and shoot.